Well, welcome to DMCNY's Midweek Recharge. Today we're going to discuss AI, marketing leadership, and the quantification of everything. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank DMCNY's annual sponsors whose generous support make events such as this possible. So thank you so much to our platinum sponsor, Axiom, our gold sponsors, Wyland, Experian, and Alliant, and our bronze sponsors, BMI Global OMS, Japs Olson Company, and Epsilon. Before we dive in, a bit of housekeeping. If you have any technical issues, please go ahead and use the chat box at the bottom. We'll address those as quickly as we can. Excuse me. And if you have any questions for our speaker, just go ahead and use the Q&A box at any time during the presentation, and we'll save time at the end for your questions. So with that, joining us today is data science evangelist Xena Ugrinsky, who is CEO of Genre X Consulting and author of the forthcoming book, Enterprise AI, Your Field Guide to the New Business Normal. Xena specializes in data science adoption, often working with clients to establish the organizational strategy they need to accelerate their business through advanced analytics. Hosting what's sure to be a spirited Q&A with Xena on what chief marketers and other executives, especially those in the C-suite, need to do to lead in this age of AI is CBSI Vice President and longtime DMCNY member, Ken Kraetzer. Welcome, Xena and Ken.
Hey, thanks, Ginger. Great to be with everybody tonight. Are very proud to be a member of the Direct Marketing Club of New York. So many great marketers have been part of the organization through the years. I call it truly a storied organization, and glad we're able to utilize technology tonight to learn a little bit more about an important concept and practice in our field, that being artificial intelligence, and we're going to learn a little bit how it evolved, how it works, what are best practices, and things we need to be concerned. And we've got a real expert with us in Xena Ugrinsky. And Xena, we met at an event last year when you were giving a talk about AI and data privacy. And great to have you with us today. And first, you mentioned to me that you have some family history in the mail order business that your parents started. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. My parents owned two mail order businesses when I was growing up. They did a fair amount of direct mail marketing, and I was enlisted to help stuff envelopes and collate catalogs. And I can still remember the smell of mimeograph machine as an early childhood memory. So I guess that dates me, I suppose.
Well, you started in the field in finance, and you were mentioning you had a tenure at Young and Rubicon and in advertising, and then you transitioned into data science and artificial intelligence. Tell us a little bit about your career path, if you would.
Sure. Well, I essentially became a frustrated consumer of data as a finance professional, and grew increasingly, frustrated by errors and the lack of critical reporting I needed to do my job. So what I did was I wound up asking for the raw, most granular data we had, learned how to build a database, and started architecting my own solutions with which to do my job better. At some point, I was tapped by a software company and pivoted pretty quickly from finance into multidimensional analytics. And later on, as a partner at KPMG, when I was responsible for the national analytics practice, I had, for example, a number of data scientists on staff. And at that point, I want to say around 2010, I learned R just so I could understand what they were doing, because if you don't understand what people are doing, how can you manage them effectively, right? And I wanted to actively participate, and it just kind of developed from then on.
And Xena, perhaps you want to tell us a little bit about your practice at Genre X, some of the kind of projects that you're working on now and things you see happening.
Sure. I started in 2017 and probably spent most of 2018 doing executive training, usually one-on-one, but some workshops for larger groups, with the intent of helping leaders make informed strategy decisions around the inclusion of data science, right, into strategy, and in effect, building out a data and analytics strategy. So that's kind of where it started. We also supply data scientists to help our clients with model building and do things like model validation and health checks. Also focus in most recently, as the technology market is evolving, we're doing a lot of production software selection and also some health checks around entire data science programs. I personally spend a lot of my time in some of the more organizational strategy related activities. So, once a company has sort of gotten started applying data science, maybe they've, incorporated it into some decision making, or they may have automated a process or two, and they start thinking about the wholesale change that's going to happen. We talk a lot about how do we reskill the workforce to be better able to use the new tools that are available.
And Xena, one of your key activities lately in the last couple of years has been editing a text, Enterprise AI, your field guide to the new business normal, although I don't think you could predict what the business normal was going to be when this book comes out shortly. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to write a text in the field.
Sure. Yes, that's true. The new business normal is now being bandied about quite a bit, and I may have to change the tagline. So I thought, given everything that was happening in data science, and similar to 10 years ago when the term big data first arose, you ask somebody what data science or what AI is, and you'll get a different answer from each person you ask. And so I thought that there was a need for a book that looks at AI through the lens of a business user of technology. And for readers who are just getting started, it demystifies AI and gives you a playbook on how to get started. And for readers who have maybe gotten some data science implementations under their belts, it's going to help them scale the reskilling of the workforce and give them some things to think about relative to the organizational transformation that needs to happen, cultural considerations, in order to really scale this.
It's going to be a very interesting read when it comes out shortly. Now, working in this field, I mean, a lot of us started in literally the mail order business and seen so much technology applied to the field of direct marketing in the last 30 years or so. And there's some big terms associated with artificial intelligence. Maybe you could kind of put them into perspective: data science, machine learning, big data, data mining, business intelligence, automation. Can you kind of put some of the terms that are associated with artificial intelligence into perspective for us?
Sure. So AI has become this catch-all term, right? It's used for everything from, let's call it just data mining, to deep learning using neural networks. It's also become a label, for example, the powered by AI, that has become completely overused in the technology market and for various consumer targeted or consumer directed products, and often is completely incorrect, or worse, tremendously misleading. So today, most machine learning is applied to 3 areas. So decision optimization, natural language processing, think, Google search or Alexa, right? and visual image processing. Those are the three areas where today's applied data science really shines. So for example, I'll just give you a marketing example for the visual image processing. You know, marketing clients used to buy advertising and really had no way of empirically determining the real value they received for their spend. Now, and this makes, for example, you know, now GM can run NASCAR video through a set of algorithms and determine exactly how many times and for how long an imprint was on the screen, right? Logo, brand names, cars, drivers, to be able to empirically validate their return on investment. That goes to, you know, sort of the quantification of everything. And if you understand how to use that data, you can effectively measure just about everything. So in short, what business leaders need to begin thinking about relative to their business issues is they have to start thinking differently in light of what is possible today. So it's no longer a matter of, you know, this is the best we could do, or this is the way we've done it in the past. You know, it's really time to be educated on what other folks have done, right? Never recreate the wheel, it's far too expensive. But they must never, however, fall into this black box conundrum. You don't just trust, you validate through other means, checks and balances, stay educated about the realities versus what, say, technology vendors are promising. And it's basically, it ties into that concept of lifelong learning is going to be super important as this market continues to evolve.
Absolutely, and that's part of, I think, our club is always trying to learn the new technology that's coming out all the time. Now, I remember neural networks being used when I was in credit card acquisition back at Chase 30 years ago. So it's, some of these concepts have been around, certainly evolving. Where were some of the places that you saw artificial intelligence applications originating, and who were some of the early adopters that have had success?
Well, we must have been in the same place 30 years ago because, so where did it originate? It originated with the desire to accurately target customers in order to either save money or effectively cross-sell, right? And marketing is really where applied data science was first implemented. So we were trying to do it as early as the late 80s at Citibank. So I was a financial analyst. Banks, as you know, are you know, we're early data hoarders. So even before the internet data explosion, they needed a better way to do analysis. So I was working with a mathematician, Peter McAllister, who I believe still teaches at West Islip High School here on Long Island. And he was trying to build an early application for nearest neighbor analysis, now called the KNN algorithm. But it's really identifying your best customers, their demographics, all of their details, and then trying to find other customers who look like them, right? So, but at the time, because the computer technology couldn't yet support the complexity and data volume of what we were doing, we were either breaking it or we would have to wait a week for a result, right? But we really can point at marketing as being the first corporate function to widely adopt data mining and applied data science.
Well, certainly artificial intelligence being used today in a wide span of industries, certainly in what we do in financial services and for many of the DMC-NY member organizations. What are some of the key uses, some of the key successes that you see in artificial intelligence applications right now?
Well, I'll go specific to marketing because of the audience, right? But it's really the ability to market to an audience of one. Now, we were talking about this in the software industry, I don't know, you know, easily up to 10, 15 years ago. But the reality was, did you have the data with which to actually do it, right? So it was fine-tuning that, it's channel identification and optimization, advanced lead scoring, things like customer profiling to drive brand engagement. You know, the list is pretty long, but it's beginning to touch all facets of the communication with a customer or a target prospect. And in fact, you know, there are some really good use cases out there. Relative, I think I'll bring one up in one of the follow-on questions.
And I guess one of the questions is the investment in artificial intelligence, how long it takes for a company or even for an industry to show return. What are some of your thoughts about where it's been proven to be very valuable and provided an important return on investment?
So I'm going to give you the consultant answer, right? It depends. So we've proven that the big bang approach doesn't work or drive sufficient value. We've seen this in the contraction of data science staff in banking, the staff layoffs at IBM Watson, for example. Folks were over investing in trying to just make this ubiquitous, like the next BI, for example. My recommendation is to start small with a business problem or a question that directly connects to the strategy. So otherwise you risk spending on experimentation and you never get to a usable insight or solution. So even today, if you think about it, 95% of all data science activity does not result in a production solution. That's staggering when you consider the amount of investment that's already been made. So regardless of what you hear in the market, the average company is still pretty immature as a whole in the use of data. And it's not about buying more technology. It's about helping your business analysts and your, your marketers get more educated and better able to take advantage of the data. But it's not just about the data, it's about changing how they're thinking about the data, right? So there's a tremendous amount of exploration that has to be part of that. But starting small allows you to build a sort of an educated community of users by solving one problem at a time. And that gives them the basic skill set, but also meaningful context for applying them, and begins to create this buzz that expands across the organization, because everybody wants to, be able to take advantage of that as well, right? When they're seeing some of the results. But the timeline itself can be pretty compressed. So I'll talk a little bit about the process in a moment. I think we've got one of those. So I'll share with you, what I view as the most effective way to get immediate ROI out of the work around data science.
Absolutely. Now, we talked a little bit about credit card acquisitions a moment ago, and I think everyone in our club is involved with trying to attract customers one way or another to their businesses and to their clients. And we see, obviously, programmatic advertising's been grown leaps and bounds, feeding advertising to Google and Facebook and other social media platforms. Where do you see some of the successes in artificial intelligence and applying, in acquisition of customers, and then providing them interesting advertising and commentary?
Well, you guys probably have are closer to what's actually happening with the Googles and the advertising, the online advertising market, right? So first of all, it leverages a tremendous amount of data on consumers, and we're all, included in those data sets. Then their ability to apply the technology to, in sub-second response, be able to crunch through that data, and based on what you have been clicking on to deliver the right ad to you, that's been going on for some time. Where I think it's now also evolving is sort of as cell phones are coming out that have the ability for facial recognition, and then by extension to literally watch where your eyes go, we'll see that entire market begin to hone in on adding that as a variable to decide what to show you and when.
And that kind of goes to the direction of how to service a customer, provide outstanding customer service, as we're all trying to do in our businesses, and also work with the vast amount of data that's being produced by the internet every day, and also customer messaging on Twitter and Facebook, perhaps, about our brands. What are some of the ways that you see artificial intelligence helping to process and find the key data in that vast amount being produced every day?
I'll give you a personal anecdote for that one. I mean, well, let me give you a commercial example first. So, this is not a new science. This has been in use for some time. For example, 5 years ago, the major car manufacturers were already actively scraping Facebook, Twitter, and consumer boards to identify potential components for advanced indications of whether they would need to do a recall on them, right? So identifying failures before they came to them through the normal channels. So most consumer-focused companies are exploring how to better engage with their customers. And for example, I was on a flight with an airline that shall remain nameless that was quite unsatisfactory, let's just call it. And I was angry enough to tweet about it. And 2 days later, their customer service department reached out to me to see what they could do to remediate. So it's not just used to target or expand the target market and pinpoint marketing. It can also be used for customer retention, in cases of dissatisfaction. So, modern methods are now allowing us to combine data and identify targets in ways we previously couldn't. We'll talk about privacy, but the ability for marketers to use what the data that's available now to dis-anonymize the data that enables them to really target much more closely. I was working with an automotive manufacturer on something similar to help them do a better job of spending their sales time with the right customers, and how to do that by just creating an automated dossier on all of the inquiries that came in order to decide which customers to schedule appointments with, right? So this is really becoming, quite ubiquitous, and for those organizations that are the laggards, I'll call them, in the market, they better catch up, actually.
Well, just going to ask you where you see opportunities, which industries are a bit behind in using artificial intelligence, data science tools. Where are some of the opportunities for growth and increasing effectiveness?
Yeah, so the industries that have been slow to come to the market, slow to develop those capabilities, I think you can categorize those. They tend to be the ones that were technology laggards from the start, right? Let's just call this what it is. It's a better analytic tool set, but it's not the only one. And I'm continually a little bit frustrated by this perception that it might be sort of a rip and replace. It's an augmentation of the things you already do well and gives you a better tool set for doing it. So the utilities industry, for example, traditional laggards of technology consumption, but they're investing pretty heavily to try to catch up in areas like smart meters and drone monitoring of RFID, interference to reduce truck rolls. So it translates into, reduced overhead and OpEx. It saves them OpEx, basically. But other areas, I want to say, the automakers are still pretty far away from ubiquitous autonomous vehicles, right? But they're really working hard on it. I think the stopgap is not so much them not making progress, but all of the social constructs around the use of autonomous vehicles that we're still going to have to get through. So I think what that sort of demonstrates is, it's often the factors that surround data science and technology that are the things that you need to tackle in order to make progress.
You've talked a little bit in some of your presentations about how to avoid biases that can enter a sample that could be projected in artificial intelligence. I remember working with a data executive named Steve Gassner who said, you got to start with a full universe of data to start a modeling project. And, we're certainly concerned now about how minorities are treated or women are treated or other segments. How do we avoid biases when we're using artificial intelligence tools?
Well, that is, as you know, and privacy, right? Those two, bias and privacy in analytics is a huge and growing topic and tremendously important for the reasons that you just outlined. There are a number of organizations that focus specifically on this area now. So, for example, Algorithm Watch is one. Another organization called the Partnership on AI. Those are two good examples of the watchdog agencies that are evolving. But in practical application, there are techniques that are evolving that are quite promising. Things like counterfactual fairness, in which you run the machine learning model, and then you change the variables that are deemed the sensitive ones, whether it's race or income or religion or gender, etc., and run it. You change those variables, and then you run it again and see if the model delivers a different output. If it's delivering the same output, then you know that those sensitive variables are not creating bias in the output. Now that's the challenge here, is that it's time consuming, right? So it adds cost onto just the activity of running the machine learning models. There are some standardized processes that are being developed. IBM has a really good one called Fairness 360. It's a framework. I like that one. And the increasing inclusion of ethicists in model development and usage is also happening more and more frequently. But I believe the need is going to expand exponentially as automation, algorithmic automation, continues to grow at the rate that it is.
And on that same direction on privacy, you mentioned in some of your talks about regulators becoming smarter about data, understanding the business better, and as they're analyzing it. What are the privacy implications you see? Certainly we have the EU and California and possible other sources of regulation. What are some of the key factors that businesses need to be aware of from a privacy and a regulatory point of view?
Sure. This is an interesting one, a sticky wicket, if you will, because some of the things that we've learned about consumer marketing is directly due to the fact that we've got organizations who are data brokers who are just storing this data and selling it for processing. But if you think about GDPR, which was obviously the father of all privacy regs, can be summarized by three things, right? The right for consumers to know and to opt into what you're doing with their data and who is processing it. The requirement that it not be stored longer than it's needed to for its original purpose, so it needs to be destroyed when you're done using it. And the right to be forgotten. And this, of course, is, as you imagine, a major thorn in the side of the data brokers who, have built entire industry out of the reuse of consumer data. So I suspect we're going to continue to see some robust debate and specifically increasing regulation in the coming years, as California has done, as I believe, we'll see a number of other states now
Sure.
joining them.
Certainly. Now, as far as companies trying to start using artificial intelligence and different tools like that are included, you have developed a process for helping companies start using analytical tools that you call RAPID, and it's a multi-step approach. Maybe you could tell us briefly about that.
Sure. So RAPID is an acronym. It's, we all love acronyms. It makes it easy to remember. So it's really, a 5-step. Step 1 is rationalize. Rationalize, what is the first question that you really need to answer, right? It's one thing to just experiment and say, oh, we have all this data, let's see what's in it, let's see what the data tells us. It's more effective when you say, let's see if we can create a list of problems that are strategic to us, that will have a material impact and can be answered empirically, right? The next step is to aggregate the pieces that you need. The first thing is, do we have the data to effectively answer the question? But also, this is not the time to go buy infrastructure. You just want some low cost proof of concept architecture. You need executive oversight. You need the right business participants, the right data, and a data scientist that ideally has tackled this or similar problems before. At that point, you're ready to prototype. Step 3. And you want to do that in the most cost-effective way to either prove or disprove that you can solve this problem. And, and only then, let's say, you have proven the hypothesis, you can do a better job. And here's the metric, right? You have to have a metric. What does success look like? So perhaps my accuracy level or my response rate on a given marketing campaign is X, and we need to use that as a metric to compare against to say we can beat that by, through machine learning or the application of data science-based data mining to better target people and get a better conversion rate, right? So you also need some metrics that you're going to define success through. Now let's assume you've gotten to a successful prototype and you're going to put it into production. You want it to run all the time. Now it's the time to look at, what is the right technology? There are so many solutions out there. You ideally want to find something that is not just going to be single purpose, right? Ideally, for technology to get the most ROI, you want to be able to use it for as many things as you can. This is, implementing a machine learning solution is no different. And so in the implementation phase, you're going to do tech selection, you're going to create a production go live plan with all of the necessary integrations to either source systems for the data or destination systems to action a given result, for example, and then also train the immediate population that is going to be interacting with the system so that they can be a good partner, not just a consumer of the output, but also continually sort of paying attention to it and, is it continuing to drive the results that you expected? right? And then in deploy, you're putting that plan into action, but where my methodology differs from most data science methodologies is that it really considers the business population as an ongoing partner every step of the way. And you want to begin to use this as a platform to socialize both the approach and the skills development needed in order to be successful. And that includes now the cultural aspects of change management, right? Back when I was doing some very large technology deployments as part of KPMG and before then, you know, what's the first two things that get struck from an order schedule when somebody is buying a technology solution? Change management and user training, right? So this is, again, no different. That has to be built in order to scale the use of data and continue to drive real value.
And Xena, one of the things that you've talked on and we think is very important is how smaller companies can start using artificial intelligence tools and processes to make their businesses more effective. And I know you have a strategy on that. Tell us a little bit about how smaller companies can utilize these tools.
Sure. Well, it kind of starts with, like, let's talk about why this is even accessible to SMBs today, right? It's been powered by two main advances. First, the massive drop in the cost of compute and data storage. And second, the growth of open source over the past decade and a half. So you can make a lot of progress when you've got people all over the globe who are just doing this because it's of interest. So that the kind of functionality that previously required hundreds of thousands of dollars invested by large corporations, that kind of capability is now accessible to most anyone with a credit card. And the explosion of training, free or otherwise, has enabled SMBs to consider how to apply it or even to build new products around it as fast as the big guys used to be able to. So for a small organization trying to get started, it all begins with clarity around what it can and can't do, and whether it can drive meaningful or material value for you, given the business that you're in. Also, you know, don't recreate the wheel, right? You don't want to learn how to create algorithms from scratch. Given the open source community, leverage what's out there, because someone's probably tried to solve something that looks pretty similar to what you've done and is sitting somewhere in a Git repository that is shareable. So, you know, there are some very, and that to me is also important because it requires you to really start understanding the nuts and bolts of it. It's not just going to a vendor and saying, hey, put this in, because then you are essentially tied to them for the, you know, remaining life of your, you know, product or the analysis that's been put in place.
Absolutely. Now, before I think we're going to take questions from the audience in a moment, but I just want to maybe have you say 30 seconds about where this is going. If you were to come back to us at the DM Club in New York in 5 years, what do you think we'd be hearing about the new capabilities are a few years down the road?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's not about the new capabilities, it's about what we do with them, right? Make no mistake, those capabilities are here today. It's a matter of the human race catching up to what our tools can do. So from a trend perspective, I expect to see an increasing mandate by companies investing in education and training that helps them, you know, reskill that workforce to be able to collaboratively work with and supervise these new applications, right? I use the word supervise deliberately because the worst thing that can happen is black box syndrome, where someone just blindly trusts what comes out of it. The next thing I think we're going to see is something that is referred to as humble AI. So AI that knows when its conclusions might be wrong. H2O is one company that's working on that concept. I really like that one. You know, data science fails are usually due to a lack of review and ongoing supervision of models. For example, machine learning plays an important role in helping marketers automate their inbound marketing campaigns through social media and pay-per-click, right? They depend on reaching the people that on these platforms to grow their webinar footprint, but the machine learning tools that drive that marketing automation could make erroneous assumptions based on the training data, maybe it's relative to user demographics, and drive those people to the wrong landing pages, right? So managing these things is going to be a skill that everyone's going to have to at least get comfortable with.
Well, Xena Ugrinsky, thank you so much. It's a terrific presentation, and we'll look forward to your book coming in. I think we have Ginger Conlon back with a few questions from the audience.
Yes, Xena, thank you so much for all the great information. So one question we have is, what are some key misconceptions about AI that are still kind of hanging around?
Oh, goodness, there are so many. Yeah, well, I started with one, right? It's a rip and replace. Let's throw out all of our old analytics and let's replace it with data science. You know, that's one. The most concerning one is really black box, right? Without a sort of a core understanding of how it works and really where we are and how it learns, you have no way of assigning confidence to what's coming out of it. And actually, I would recommend, you know, a book that is highly entertaining. It's written by a real, no kidding, like, you know, data scientist, mathematician. It's called "You Look Like a Thing and I Love You." And what it does is it walks you through what actually happens in machine learning and how it arrives at its conclusion. And once you've read that, you will have a healthy mistrust of just believing what the models spit out.
Right, right. That's great. And then one other question we have for you is, in terms of user acceptance of this thing that so many people are scared they're going to take their job, you know, any advice for managers in dealing with that situation?
Yes, that actually is another, you know, I would consider that a misconception, provided we invest in human capital in the way that we have to, right? So I think, you know, the example that's often given is, you know, ATMs came out and everybody thought tellers were going to go away. Well, we kind of see that finally happening now that you can make a deposit using your phone. But so the advice to managers is this. Data science is going to enable us to do some very interesting things with automation. So if it is a heavily manual task or it's repetitive, you know, you want to start thinking about, like, those are not the areas you want to be in, right? Because ultimately those will be taken up by the robots, warehouse workers, et cetera. Those are folks who are going to be heavily impacted. The degree to which our workers get comfortable as managers, our ability to help them get comfortable in working with these tools is going to have a direct correlation with their own career advancement going forward. Yeah, it's you don't have to be a data scientist, but you have to at least be able to work with a data scientist and conceptually kind of get what's happening, right?
Yeah, makes sense. All right, this next question is a little long, so I'm going to read it. Bear with me.
Okay.
Do you have an example of how group ideation from the marketing team or the consumer has been using AI to generate innovative new strategies, programs, or successes?
Sure, I'll give you one example. This is actually an old one too, but the first one that came to mind. In 2013-ish, I want to say, I was working with a group of data scientists who focused mainly in automotive, right? And we were doing an engagement with one of the major auto manufacturers, and the problem that they were trying to resolve was we do not understand why this particular car model is outselling this other model, which in effect is almost the same car. So why is this one like rolling out of the dealerships at a rate like almost double this other model? And so we took all of their sales information, we took their design specs, we scraped social media, and actually that's where we found the answer. The difference between the two cars, and we determined this by seeing a lot of chatter about this one variable, and that was, or you know, item. It was the first car that they had put in that had a USB slot in the dash.
Wow.
So, I mean, really, you know, but we were able to empirically tie it to that being at least the voice of the customer told them that's why they bought that particular model.
Right. That's
right.
amazing.
So product development, you know, as we've gone from sort of design thinking, right, to switching it and saying, okay, let's let the consumers sort of tell us what the design should be. And it's kind of group thinking or group sourcing. You know, we did a little bit of that at Booz Allen too. We were experimenting with some crowdsourcing solutions for certain business problems.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you again, Ken. Thanks so much for hosting, and Xena, thank you again for all of your great insight. I appreciate you both being here today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ginger. Great job.
Yes, thanks. And I want to thank everyone who attended. And just to remind you that we will see you next week, same bat time, same bat channel, if you're old enough to remember that terminology. We are going to talk about hot marketing trends to lean into and those to lean away from. We have Kim Davis, who you might remember from Direct Marketing News as editor. He is now the editorial director over at MarTech Today. So he's going to be joining me for a Q&A to talk about where marketers should be focusing their technology energy right now. So we hope to see you there. Be sure to register. And thanks again, everyone, for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.